George Foreman, why are you running for the 18th District?
Well, I'm running for Congress in the U.S. 18th District, first and foremost, because it's my duty. I'm George Foreman IV, which means I come in a long line of civil servants, public leaders, and givers. And I'm just one in the many generations of people who devoted their life to serving the community. So I'm just next up in line. I was inspired by Sylvester Turner. I was inspired by Sheila Jackson. I didn't get to meet the great Mickey Leland, but to go through his research, his bills and proposals, I have a vision for what this district could be. And instead of being on the sidelines, I want to be at the table, making the decisions with the leaders of our state. That's my mission, my passion. So I've done it on the business end, but I would love to dedicate my life to serving the people at the best capacity, and I think that's at the U.S. Congress.
What's your vision for the 18th?
My vision for the 18th is based on better. Whatever we've seen in the past, pulling those things together and just doing better for the people. I've grown up in our city, and often you drive through the 18th and you can identify it for what it doesn't have, or for the struggle that the people who live in the 18th have had to deal with. That's what we're known for in the 18th. There's portions of us in the 18th Congressional District that do really well. Our neighborhoods are really well served. The water goes out when the need be, but there are other portions who are constantly left out, constantly forgotten, and that just so happened to be where my grandmother was from, that side of the 18th. That just so happened to be where my dad wanted to service his church and used to preach street corners, that part of the 18th. So I get to see it from top to bottom, but it's my duty, if I know how to do something better, to step up and provide. So that's what I'm doing for my community.
What, in your time running during this race, what are you hearing from the community that are the top three concerns for the 18th that you would like to address?
Well, number one is infrastructure. People are always and constantly worried that the next storm is going to destroy their life and everything they have to stand on. And they want to know that the American people, the federal government, especially the federal government, but more than anything, the state of Texas, is doing the things necessary to make sure that they can live and thrive here. So fear of what the next storm is going to bring is the number one concern. Is our grid going to hold up? Is there going to be FEMA or some sort of crisis support when these storms hit? That is number one. After that comes education. We're always, Houston ISD is not just my former employer, but also that's our largest employer in our district. So it's very important that we see the education support to make sure that all these kids in our district have a real bright future and that there's going to be employment for them, that they're going to have the skills when they leave the classroom, or more than anything, they're going to be safe when they walk into these classrooms, buildings. That's what the people are concerned about. I also hear a lot of conversation about, man, George, we got all these workforce programs and trade skills, options for kids, but they don't want to do them. And even kids complaining, what do you mean we can't use our cell phones in school? I say that to say there is a culture gap between our technology, what we have, and the solutions to make sure our children are retaining the information to become great employees one day. So I think there's an innovation and infrastructure conversation to be had to make sure that the skill set is in our community to provide for the future, because there's a crisis in our hand.
You kind of alluded to your wait, let me go back there. You said there's a crisis on our hand. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
There is a workforce crisis, not just in America, but in our district. I just saw a report that we're of the most poverty-stricken city. Houston is the most population of those living below poverty. I think at 26%. Sorry if I misquote, but astronomically high for a district that is so rich in potential, has so many young people, but more than anything, a lot of people who are retiring, leaving the workforce, but no one is stepping up to fill their gap. So that creates a wage gap as well as a skills gap. Are we going to be able to afford the infrastructure that the next generation, the previous generation, leaves us? Are we going to be able to keep up the infrastructure that the baby boomers left to us? That's a crisis on our hand. And we need to make sure we're building the skilled workforce, the trade skills, the lawyers, the CEOs, but also the plumbers, the electricians, to keep this situation going. Our fabric of society is held up financially by the benefits that we receive and that we pay into. And if you don't have a workforce to keep that system going, you end up in financial crisis, and we can't have that, not in the 18th, no more.
You mentioned the future workforce. You also mentioned your background in education. Kind of talk to us about how your background you think could make it an asset for the role in the 18th.
Well, my introduction into education came through teaching literacy at the K through 5 level. So I know how important it is that you get those early diagnoses for kids to make sure they know, oh, here are my obstacles to success in the classroom, and how do I get back on track? So funding and the resources for early diagnosis and early intervention in education is essential if you want to keep kids out of prison and build a real workforce. Now, that's my personal background in doing the research to support that, as well as being in the classroom. Outside of that, by being, I'm a board member for the National Job Corps Association, so workforce development is always at the forefront of my mind because it's a part of my decision-making day to day. I see programs like the WorkSource, Texas WorkSource, or workforce commissions of all kinds trying to fill the gaps in for where people don't have housing, groceries. So I think more than anything, if you can get people paid as soon as possible through apprenticeships, you can really make a meaningful difference in not just the education process, but people feeling confident and proud to enter the workforce. You got to show kids by 15, 16, 17, hey, there's wages for you, there's a workforce for you, and there's a place for you to be successful no matter what. And I think we have to get that back to the forefront of education.
So education's a big thing you're running on here.
Education and workforce, to me, are those that, if I could stand on just two pillars alone, it would be education and workforce.
Why those two?
You know, I think the future for what we want in America comes from making sure, one, we have active and passionate students who have a trajectory for success. You can't have any dreams for a society if you don't have that. Young people excited to get to work, to build a skill set. And second to that, if you want to build a great society, the society of the future, you have to have the infrastructure of the future. You have to have the engagement and, more than anything, the workforce to sustain that infrastructure. We want the freeways of the sky. We want the flying cars. We want the greatest railroads on possible. We're going to need a workforce to service and sustain that. And it has to be domestically grown and sustained. And I know that that has to be true to build a great society. Food, water, healthcare, yes, those are essentials, but also that infrastructure is important too.
You're running as an independent. With the government shut down currently right now, if you were in Congress, how would you move forward?
Well, as an independent, I can look at all the issues and then make the best, most strategic judgment based on what's best for the American people. I have no party loyalties based on extreme donors or extremists in the party to direct my loyalty. My loyalty is first and foremost to the American people. So if I was there, I don't think there would be issues like shutdowns because I could intervene, weigh in, be a voice of logic, and not just be loyal to the extreme hate that gets thrown from one side to another. I think we the people have suffered enough on the extremism. We really just want an efficiently run government and the best resources available to us as the people. It's in our Constitution that we must promote the general welfare of our society. And that means sometimes putting the petty squabbles aside and making sure our government runs well. That's what we the people want. Democrat or Republican, I'm the best candidate for you because I'm able to put the nonsense aside, focus on what America needs, and make sure that's the forefront. Too often it's one vote that decides our government and what bills are going to go. But how often is that one vote devoted to the people? That's very rare. Usually it's an extremist or maybe somebody who's just the last one there, who knows. But I want to make sure that the people and their needs are at the forefront for the first time.
And with the government shutdown currently, which way would you stand? Who would you caucus with to move forward?
What's important is not that you determine who you caucus with, but that you understand the language inside the bills. And I'm more interested in the power of the pen. What is written in the bill, how do we change it and structure it so that way the most Americans are satisfied for it? Now, if that sentiment leads me right or left on the issue, so be it. And I'll be able to come back home and tell my community, here's the decision I made and here's why. What do you think we should do? And then get feedback from the people. I think that needs to be a priority, and too often that isn't even a concern. We hear about what they did to us instead of having us at the table while decisions are made.
Sorry if I keep harping on this point here, but because I think the members of the 18th will want to know, okay, right now with the government shutdown, who do you side with? I know it's kind of elementary, but...
No, I mean, I sat with the other day, I'm having a conversation about this exactly, and I'm going through pretty much a similar conversation. And a lady stood up, walked over to me, a furloughed, she said, I'm a Fed. That's how she introduced herself. But she's a furloughed worker, somebody who works and depends, their livelihood depends on not just who wins on the next election or who the last president was, but how can I best serve the American people in my role? That's her livelihood. That's how she pays her bills. And odds are, if I know, working for government, she doesn't make enough. But she still has to depend on our government to run efficiently to do her job. She's living right here in our district. So these problems are amongst us, the people who we depend on. They're one government shutdown away from living under a bridge themselves. So who do I believe in and who am I fight for? Whose side am I on? We the people. And very often that's not the answer. And I'm kind of frustrated with that because activists walk out, march out, throw stones, point sticks, but then they come back home to a decimated economy. That's heartbreaking to me. And a lot of these things can be solved as simple as a comma instead of a period, or a shall instead of a should. Little things like this make all the difference in the world. And I want to make sure that that becomes a priority again. When we built our Constitution, it wasn't which side are you on, it was we have to survive. We have to make sure our nation survives. So we created a Constitution based on principles. Well, those are the principles that I'm focused on. And if the bills support those principles, I'm all for it.
So you'd vote to reopen the government today?
If I was in Congress, I have to see the bills that are on the mount. A lot of it, to me, is based on allocation of resources. So I'd want to know what programs are getting slashed and what my pen and my yes would fund. I think that's very important to ask. But I am absolutely for the sustaining and efficiency of a well-run government. That's the top priority to me.
So reopening?
If that's what it means, a well-run government means reopening to me. Yes, that would be a priority.
Okay. As an independent running here, I think you uniquely can help bridge the divide that's so happening nationally, that so many people say we want members of Congress to work together. If elected, what role will you have in doing that?
Well, I grew up in a prize-fighting family, so I understand the fundraising and showmanship that goes into a good contest, a good back and forth and a good banter. That's good for raising money. It's good for fundraising. It's great for television, but often it's not great for government efficiency. I want to be the diplomat. I want to be the problem solver. I want to be the resource to solutions. That's what I want to be known for. So I'm not here to throw stones. I'm here to gather stones together and make sure we're all well provided for the future. That's how I look at these problems.
Let's go to a viewer question we got from Facebook here. Without sounding prejudiced, the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee never had any meetings concerning her other constituents. Will you address the whole district?
You know, my mission is to fight for the entire district. The reason I chose to run as an independent is to welcome all sides to me. It's about time our whole district was at the forefront. If there's anyone that's felt left out in the past for whatever reason, no problem. George Foreman is here for you now. I served the community at a nonprofit, a youth and community center that was here to help get kids off the street, out of trouble, and on the trajectory towards success. That's my devotion. I didn't care if this kid was from the north side or the south side. I didn't care what zip code he lived in or how much his parents paid in property taxes. What concerned me was the well-being of this child. And that's my mission today. Not the well-being of any extremist, but the well-being of the U.S. citizen. We deserve every drop of loyalty and support that the flag has when we wrap it around us. And I've been wrapped in the flag every day of my life. The silver spoon that I come from comes from the American flag and the opportunity it gave to my family. Without the American flag, I'd be nothing. There wouldn't even be a me. My dad would probably be dead or in jail if not for the opportunity that America gave to him. So that's the legacy I carry, a legacy to serve the people.
Here's another question from a viewer, this one from TikTok. What are you going to do to address homelessness in our area?
Ooh, homelessness, to me, this is, and I learned this in my work with the Job Corps, there is a delicate line where efficiency and humanity must meet. You can't ever be so efficient that you let your humanity slip. And you can't be so focused on pushing the human force that you end up bankrupt and in debt. If something is dragging you down, you got to know when to start finding new resources to help you. And I think our homeless fight needs new resources. There are nonprofits who are doing a great job in addressing the homelessness issue. They're addressing drug support, mental illness, emotional stability, housing. A lot of nonprofits are solving these problems. I think if America can say, maybe it's not our job as a country to be the end-all be-all, but find the nonprofits, the charitable foundations, and the city services that know how to do it efficiently and fuel them the best we can with the power of the flag. That's our duty as a federal government, and that's what I think we should be doing. Supporting the best practices in the industry, not trying to take on the burdens of the whole thing. The homelessness is a we problem, so it's very important that we look to all of each other to solve that problem.
So is there anything you could do in your role in Congress to do so?
Grants. To me, to make sure that all the institutions that are well known for how they address the homelessness problem have the full backing and support of our federal government to be most efficient through grants and federal funding. And to make sure that that comes to the 18th Congressional District is my passion, my mission, and my duty. Now, I know people have feelings about government spending, but man, when Texas was independent, we had a decision. But because America offered us support in our independence, we pledged our loyalty to America. Well, it's the same today. We want our independence. Keep the federal government out of our business, but when we need help, wrap us in the flag and make sure that we're successful. That's what we want as Texans, and that's what I'm here to support.
You allude to federal dollars and federal spending. The SNAP benefits will change come November 1st after the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill Act. Most of the people significantly impacted are in the 18th District. What do you say to them, or are there any changes you think need to happen, or keep things as is and really focused on the work requirements for the first?
You know, I had time in the free market to study insurance, to study the infrastructure, the B2B, the business-to-business conversations of insurance. And I learned early on that the solutions in social services, in healthcare, in SNAP benefits, a lot of those are just organizational and administrative. The resources are there for us to provide for each other in times of need. They're there, but do they have efficiency, as we talked about, to support the longevity of the programs? Very often there's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse that can be prevented by just bringing these systems up to speed and up to standard. When we saw during the COVID shutdown how quickly we were all giving out our stipends and benefits. Well, American people move that fast, and we need to make sure that our benefits and support for those in the most need move as quickly as business, because crisis can happen at any given moment, and we need to know that the systems we're paying into are going to be there for us when we need it. And I think it's important that our systems are most efficient. Now, Texas is very unique in how they receive benefits, SNAP benefits, oversight, and intervention from the federal government. So I think it's very important that we respect Texas, let Texas be Texas, but have the best Texas advocates in the U.S. government to make sure we're supported, but not overburdened by federal intervention.
You sort of said two things there, that yes, if there's support, we should use the said support, but then you also alluded to waste, fraud, and abuse. So which is it with the SNAP benefit changes?
When I hear the conversation of SNAP benefits, I think about fraud, waste, and abuse, and eliminating those things to make sure the program is most optimal, that it serves the most people as greatly as possible. That's how I look at that issue. Now, the federal government will write the state of Texas a check, and I want to make sure that whatever that looks like, it goes the most to the people who need it most, not getting caught up in administrative fees, costs, and structures that don't even benefit even the bottom line workers who are trying to provide the families. So, an extra bonus, an extra $1 million bonus for an exec is great, but an extra $300 for a grandma who's taking care of herself after she's lost her family, it makes a huge difference for her. So I think it's an administrative structure to make sure that the SNAP system, all federal benefits for the poor, are most efficient, as well as preserving human decency.
Ray, anything you can think of that you have?
When you go to Congress, what is the first thing you want to accomplish, knowing that the 18th have selected you and voted for you as their front runner, and you want to make that promise to them? What is it that you want to change to have the greatest impact on them?
You know, as I get to travel the district and meet and talk to the needs of the people, I often think about what's the first thing I'm going to do when I get to Congress. And the first thing that comes to mind is I need to get a bill to the president's desk. Now, that bill in my head should be based on education, and that bill should be based on preserving and protecting our workforce for the future. That can be done in simple wording of a sentence, but to come back home and say, here's our bill, the whole 18th, this is going to empower all of our kids, all of our infrastructure for workforce and education, and to have that, to sit in the Oval Office and to see the president sign the bill from the people to the people of the 18th Congressional District would be the greatest honor of mine ever. That is a bipartisan push. You know, there is no great bill that we've seen in our time that was one party swept it all. It always took someone reaching across the aisle to say, how can we make the best deal for the people? And that's what I'm devoted to. Not just the best policy for a party, but the best policy for a people, signed into law by the President of the United States. That's my mission.
You seem like a big policy person in that you want to have assistance in crafting legislature instead of someone else doing it. You want to be in the room as the commas, as you alluded to, are being written, or the periods.
You know, my master's is in public administration, and I took time to work in Texas policy. So I really got to see the nonprofits, the free people who pull their resources together, associations who do the research to say, hey, Senator Foreman, Congressman Foreman, Rep Foreman, City Councilmember Foreman, this is what we need. They've already done the work. They just got to find one rep who's willing to listen to the needs of the people and carry that bill to the next step. Well, that's what I'm looking for. So if you have a nonprofit, if you have a mission statement, if you have an organization that fights for the rights of the people, now's the time to call me and let me know. I want these bills. I want to make our country amazing. I want to make it great for everyone who comes here. People who move their whole families from across the world for the American dream. They deserve the best possible dream, the most resources to make sure they're successful so they can bring innovation into the world. That's what I'm about. And I believe that that's a matter of wording, phrasing, and diplomacy. Not always fighting. I grew up in a boxing family. To lace up gloves, throw in a mouth guard and slug it out, that's easy. I've been doing that since I was a kid. But to find diplomacy, to make sure it's win-win scenarios, that make sure everybody leaves with a smile, that's a craft I learned from my father, a craft my father learned from the great Mary Kay and Sam Walton when they pulled him aside and told him how to improve himself as a salesman. And that's what my mission is, to make sure I'm the best salesman for the 18th Congressional District and their needs.
In the 18th, obviously we know redistricting is happening. There are lawsuits happening, but March will be the primary for possibly the new redistrict lines. And the big elephant in the room is whether Congressman Al Green will run in the new redistrict lines. If elected for the 18th, do you plan on running for re-election?
If elected for the 18th Congressional District, my mission will be to first and foremost finish out my term and maximize my opportunity during this administration and some of the crazy things we've had to deal with. That'll be my first mission. Now, come re-election, I'll have to do things like primary, talk to the people about who do they want as the next rep, and determine my future. And all these things will come, but my focus right now is exclusively on the job at hand. That's winning this seat for Congress and finishing out this term to make sure the legacy of Sylvester Turner, the legacy of the 18th District, the legacy of Sheila Jackson goes out with roaring success. I could pass more bills in my term than any other rep has in the last 30 years. It's possible because we have a unified House, Senate, and President in our federal government, and a pretty unified Texas. A lot of our Democrats and Republicans here locally agree on a lot of things, and they find ways to get things done. I think we can carry that spirit and lead America into a new trajectory based on logic, reason, and nonpartisan, bipartisan, real solutions. I think we have a rare time to do this in our country.
All right. The last question we've been asking the candidates today is, what's a random fact that people might not know about you?
A random fact that people may not know about me is I'm an undefeated fighter. So I had one fight, I won by knockout, and I chose actually after that to finish my master's and focus on my career. I was building companies at the time, so I just didn't have time to train. But boxing is it's a trade skill, but boxing is the one trade skill I always dreamed of being an Olympic gold medalist or a prize fighter or world champion. That's always been the dream. But my dad said, no boxing until you graduate college. And by the time you graduate college, the last thing you want to do is sleep in a crummy gym and run, get up at 4 a.m. and run 10 to 17 miles. That's the last thing you want to do when you're done with class.
George Foreman IV, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.